This is Moneyline Mania with Chaz and the crew.
Shazzy boy, what is going on, my friend? How was your weekend?
We really have done, don't get me wrong, we do well all the time. If you ever checked us out Thursdays on the Worldwide Sports Radio Network, we cash tickets while you listen. I mean, a lot of places give you their plays. We cash them while we listen. But yeah, last week was pretty good, and I'm excited because remember, you guys talk about these teams all week. We don't really follow teams. We look for opportunities. So today we've got Jonathan from San Antonio. That's what we call him. If you're on Vegas Insider, you know him by his real name. Hector has been hanging around with us at Sports Betting Weekly from the beginning. He's just a really knowledgeable soccer guy, sports guy in general, but a soccer guy, he's really, really good. That's what the beauty of checking us out here on the 103.9 is you're going to catch sports that you probably don't necessarily watch, never mind bet. But here's the thing, if you're cashing tickets, do you care?
No. Hector, I checked out the Neymar documentary. Love Neymar, Brazilian player, if people don't follow English football, what we call soccer here in America. That was an unbelievable documentary. If you like soccer, European football, go check it out on Netflix. It's an unbelievable documentary. Anyways, are we ready to get into some conversation with some of the games this week? March Madness is around the corner. That's where everybody likes to make their money. College football is very big when it comes to betting in the books and DraftKings, FanDuel. Anyways, Chaz, are you ready, buddy?
That's the thing, that Thursday in Las Vegas of March Madness, when the games tip off at like 9 in the morning our time, go all day long, 64 teams to start. By the time Saturday morning rolls around, half of them have gone home already. Remember, the regular season's ending. Then you got the tournaments, the conference tournaments. This is the time of year where college basketball is at its finest. Now, for Sunday, there's a few games. We talked about last week, St. John's was off. They're playing DePaul, so I'm going to Jonathan have the floor here.
College basketball has been it's a grind. I kind of do the smaller schools, the MAA conference and the Mountain West conference. It's kind of smaller schools. You get more of a edge, I think. When the odds makers are making the lines, those big games, those lines are tight. Kentucky, Arkansas, that was this morning. That's exactly where it's supposed to be. You look at some smaller schools like East Tennessee, UNC Greensboro, Harvard, Princeton's going to tip off tomorrow morning. They just came off that Friday game. I actually lost by 0.5 point plus 6.5 on Harvard, and I had over 141.5. It landed on 141 in a 7-point game. So probably against Harvard again. Princeton is a really good team that can shoot the ball lights out. I think the way that Princeton plays the game, they push a lot of pace and they shoot a lot of threes. That forces Harvard to have to do the same thing and keep pace. So off a loss, now they get to go home, and I think that Harvard's a good look at in the morning. The over-under, I'm probably not going to touch this time around because I think that last game, it was on pace for the over, then they just kind of went into a couple of spurts that didn't happen. So looking at the Harvard game for the morning, Monmouth and Siena is going to tip off. That should be a pretty decent game. I'm going to look at the home dogs in Siena. I think that they can keep pace with Monmouth. They're 7-3 against the spread, but Monmouth's only 4-6 last 10. They're kind of struggling covering the number. St. John's and DePaul is kind of an interesting game because DePaul's actually played pretty well, covered some numbers. But St. John's eating on Butler a couple of nights ago. I think they won by like 30 or so. And they're 8-2 last 10 against the spread. So that's going to be an interesting look for me. I think St. John's is one of those teams getting stronger, getting ready for the conference tournaments. And you have a lot of these teams now. Conference tournament time is an exciting time because you have teams that they got to win. If they don't win, they're not going to the tournament. St. John's one of those teams that could probably make a deep run in their Big East tournament that's kind of under the radar. They're going to play first day, kind of getting the opening in that tournament. That game is going to be interesting for me. St. John's probably play, though.
Talking about a couple of the guys that do the smaller conferences. Jonathan is one of them in college football. There could be 80 games on there. If you walk into the sports book on a Saturday morning in college basketball, it takes the board 3 rotations, 300 games. There's no way they could be that accurate with 300 games. And by Jonathan hopping on those schools where at least a third of the time, I have heard of the school Jonathan is telling us to bet, but I couldn't A, tell you where they're located, or B, name their mascot.
I do like the call, Jonathan, with the Mountain West. I think there's a lot of good sleepers this year, maybe double-digit seeds in this NCAA tournament this year that have been very good programs for a while. Colorado State's been the biggest surprise one this year, and Boise State and Wyoming, too. Don't sleep on them either. Not going to be the same shoe-in for your Aztecs, Chas.
Those top 4 teams in the Mountain West, they could have beat Boise State, and they just didn't, but it was on the road, and they covered. But when you're a fan, the covering is great and puts the money in your pocket, but you want your team to win if they can as well. well.
And St. John's is the big team right here in New York. Everybody is a St. John's fan, especially here in Long Island. College basketball is not big here in New York. It's crazy to say when this is the birthplace, a lot of people believe, of basketball. Some of the great basketball players that played at Rucker and Harlem and Manhattan. But really, St. John's is the team out here. There are a couple of teams that have gotten into the tournament. Stony Brook over here is very popular now. They have a pretty good basketball team year in and year out. But St. John's is the team. St. John's is where everybody wants to see get into the tournament and make those dark runs. I say dark runs because it gets darker as the runs go further. I hope St. John's makes it this year. I really want to see one of our teams out here actually move further. Villanova is not part of New York, out of Philadelphia, but Villanova is always good. They have a great coach. They always play a great defensive scheme, and they're always in it. And this year they'll be in it again with Wright running the ship over there. So they're dangerous as well.
Every week I look for you guys at those 5 schools. I'm looking at the Big East, Knicks, the Nets, the Rangers, and the Islanders. People that like a team bet the team sometimes whether they should or not. Here's the thing Jonathan mentioned. Sure, they did blow out somebody big time. They won by like 30, St. John's the other day. They're 2-1 against the spread. They're averaging 85 points, but even if you throw out that big game where they scored 90-something points, they've scored at least 78 points in every single one of those games. DePaul just beat Georgetown, but again, really, you could put in any school beat Georgetown in a sentence. And really, I think in the last 2 months, you're right. And before that, DePaul was 2-8. So if you're leaning St. John's, I have no problem with that. But I think you really need to have a team total in there as well. When you have the team total and the team total hits before the game goes to final, like that game yesterday, Jonathan was saying about he lost by a hook on both the side and the total. It happens. You win by a hook on the side and the total sometimes. But when you cash guys that team total before the game is final, it takes all the pressure off because you've already got a ticket cashed. And that's why I really love team totals when they're relevant.
That's what I love listening to all these handicappers. The best handicappers are on Twitter. They don't really shed any of their full information on what they're going to do and how they're going to place their bets unless you pay them. But I think it's very interesting when you look at all these different handicappers and how they're parlaying their picks and making their choices moving forward every single night. Like John, he makes a living on it. A lot of people can't say that. I mean, a lot of people lose their paychecks because they want to make the most money out of their bets. So that's why you guys are the best.
Across the Sound, there's a place called Morris Cove. It's in New Haven. It's right on the water. Idyllic place to grow up. But Joey Critello was a guy that gambled a lot growing up. Now, we're in high school. He's working after school in a mattress factory, and it's Friday afternoon, and he's asking to borrow money. He got paid that day. He was asking to borrow money because he had already lost it all gambling. But the next week, we come into the park, and there's 2 kegs, and the keg party is going on. Because he won money, he was throwing a keg party. That's why I love sports bettors, because they rock and roll no matter whether they're up or down. They just keep grinding.
Sports betting is a grind. I know New York just legalized it. And I think people forget that to be a successful sports bettor, you just got to hit 55%. People on Twitter, too, like, I'm hitting 80% for the whole. That doesn't happen. The realistic part about sports betting is you lose, and you lose a lot. And that's the crazy part. You can actually lose that many part of your bets, and you're still being a successful, profitable sports bettor. So I think you have to be careful when you're on Twitter. There's so many people on Twitter that are the best sports handicapper of all time, and they're hitting 90%, and they will tell you all this kind of stuff. But sports betting, you got to be realistic with it and understand you're going to lose, and there's going to be grinds. I lost that Harvard-Princeton game by hooking the hook, and I was back at it Saturday morning with all my plays, and can't change up too much. Know what works for you and stick to that system. And if you put in the time and that work, and a lot of people want to be a professional sports bettor because they think it's easy, but it's not. I pour in hours just to get one extra little angle that I can find on a game. So just understand it's a grind. You're going to lose a lot, and if you win 55%, you're okay.
Hey, Errol, so you mentioned the soccer documentary that you watch, but honestly, on all your loudmouth shows, all your shows on the Worldwide Sports Radio Network, how often do you guys actually talk about soccer?
We actually don't. We've had some soccer players come on our show, professional goalkeepers. But here in New York, soccer's becoming popular. It's not as big as it is in Europe or overseas. So obviously the United States women's team is one of the best in the world. The United States men's team is and when they're not good, nobody cares because none of these top American players are as big as a guy like Ronaldo or Messi, Neymar. These guys are the best of the best.
Some of these younger players, we are getting that. There's like 5 players on Team USA. They play overseas. You're a good soccer player. You want to play overseas. You're not playing in the MLS. We have a team now They're not the best. They're I think they're ranked 11th. But we have players now. We're never going to be a soccer nation. But we are cultivating youth soccer to get to that level to compete. Because I think people were sick of the U.S. just going in and not making the World Cup, or going into the World Cup and losing to Uganda and other teams that we shouldn't be losing to. This year, you said popularity is getting there. Well, it's World Cup year. So you're going to see the popularity this year because by November, we're going to have the World Cup going on. That's always when popularity kicks up. So I think soccer's getting there.
And that was my segue to get Hector giving us some winners because he's part of our Wake and Bake crew.
Soccer time.
So what we do is we're here in San Diego, which is the Mexican border. Soccer is huge here, and it has been huge here as long as I've known it. But people get so bent out of shape, and I laugh at the numbers. Oh, New York, New Jersey, and the handle, and how much sports betting. The World Cup will make those numbers look like what our country's deficit is. The beauty of soccer is we get that, and you get it all day, because I woke up this morning, right? The English game was a final, I think. I'm up early today because, it's 103.9. You don't mess around. When you get on 103.9, you do your homework. I was ready.